Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
Well,
how are we doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
I think most of us are here, aren't we, John?
yeah.
Okay.
Hello, by the way.
It's 7:31, so I propose that we start. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the full parish council meeting, or whatever it is, Monday the 15th of February. John, would you like to do the honours with the notices, please?
Yes, certainly will. Chair, GDPR notice. Please note that the council is, and members of the public and individual councillors could be, making audio or video recordings of this meeting. The council's recordings will be uploaded to a cloud-based website of record and will be available indefinitely to the general public. By participating at the meeting, including by merely logging into it, you consent to this. If you do not consent to these terms, you should please not log into the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
None received, Chair.
Super. Do we have any declarations of interest?
I can see no hands.
Okie dokie. So just before we move to questions on the floor, I just want to say a couple of very quick words. This is for everyone, obviously. Just as you will all know, if you've actually seen the agenda, we do have a very full agenda this evening. And in the interest of completing it efficiently and fully, I would like to ask that when speaking to an item, please keep to the point, being respectful towards others as per our code of conduct. It is also helpful time-wise if only new points are added to the debate. Agreement can be noted via the voting process. As our meetings are recorded and available for the public to hear, I'm sure they'll be very reassured to know that SPC members are able to demonstrate courteous and productive debates on all issues, unlike Handlers. Thank you. So, questions from the floor. Do we have any questions? If anyone on the floor would like to ask a question, could you please turn your camera on so that we can see you? If you don't turn your camera on, I'm going to assume you don't want to ask a question. Okay, no. No questions. So that brings us to the minutes of the previous meeting, which is item 4 to 3, the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January 2021 as a true and fair record. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't at this meeting, but I fear that either the minutes are incorrect or some strange decisions were made. If I could ask you to turn to page 5 of these draft minutes, items 125.2.1 through to 125.4.3. Now, all but one of them say to adopt or otherwise any recommendations. Well, Chair, we either adopt a recommendation or we don't adopt it. That's what the otherwise means. So we can't adopt or otherwise. So we should have, and I don't know whether we did, because as I say, we weren't there, we should have voted to adopt, or we should have voted otherwise not to adopt. But we can't have agreement to adopt or otherwise.
Do you have a view on this?
Sorry, Joanna, were you asking me?
Sorry, yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, that's true enough, depending upon, of course, if there were any recommendations. So there were no recommendations within the, I think we talked about this at the time, so my error for not clarifying precisely which. So there were no recommendations within community committee. Either the minutes or the draft minutes, that's 125.2.1 and 125.2.2. So that was not to adopt otherwise. Draft minutes of the 5th of January, oh, they were deferred. personnel, adopt, that was adopting
Well,
recommendations. Yes, I'd have to check my notes. Yes.
Well, as it says, would it be acceptable then if we change the minutes to say adopt any recommendations? Because if there aren't any, then it doesn't matter.
no, Chair, you can't change the minutes to say something different to what was agreed. These are minutes recording what was.
Change what was agreed.
No, I'm sorry, Chair. These are minutes.
That wouldn't change them.
Well, it would, wouldn't it? Because
Why?
if what was decided was to adopt or otherwise, for example, the Personnel Committee recommendations, we can't now change the minutes to say that we were adopting them.
Well, we can if we did adopt them, as
But
they were adopted.
Well,
Steve?
clearly,
Yeah, as far as I can see, it's clearly a typo that there's been from cutting and pasting. I was at the meeting. I don't recall any occasion where we didn't accept any recommendations. So I'd propose that we ask John to correct the typo by rephrasing it, rewording it from to adopt or otherwise, and say to receive the minutes and adopt any recommendations therein. Clearly a typo, and if we can get it agreed and then moved on.
Thank you, Steve. John?
Yeah, it would be appropriate to do that. Apologies for the typo. Sorry, I wasn't made aware a little bit before the meeting, but certainly we can do that, Chair.
Rodney?
I'd like to propose that we defer them till next month and get them right. I mean, all this about just changing. So I'd like to propose.
For your proposal?
Sorry?
Do we have a seconder for your proposal?
Well,
well, Chair, I'll second that, but I'd like to speak to it first, please, because John said his own notes aren't clear. So unless everybody has a very, very clear recommendation, a recollection to which we can defer, I think we have to wait until we've been able to listen to the recording to see what actually happened.
Fine. I think we can vote on Rodney's motion. Rodney, you proposed it. Are you seconding it, Paul?
Yes, Chair.
Right. Okay. So all those in favour of Rodney's motion?
5-4, Chair.
All those against?
7 against.
Right. I'm sorry, Rodney, that motion didn't pass. So
well, it's just typical of Steyning Parish Council.
Please don't interrupt me, Rodney. It's unnecessary.
Dysfunctional.
Rodney, if you're going to persist in being abusive and interrupting, I might have to ask Council to mute.
I'm being factual.
Rodney, Steve, do we have a seconder for Steve's motion that we accept the minutes? Liz, are you seconding that? Thank you. All those in favour?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair. May I? My motion wasn't that we just accept the minutes. My motion was that we correct the typos to take out the words or otherwise.
Well, that's what I was saying. Why didn't you vote with me then, Steve?
I didn't agree with your motion.
But I wasn't asking you to speak. So, Sarah, do you have something you want to add to this? You're on mute.
Oh, can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Can I make an amendment, please?
Yes.
I'd like to, similar to what Councillor Goldsmith said, but I would like to, because first of all, it's 6 different times that we've got and to adopt or otherwise any recommendations. I don't call that a typo. That part of the sentence completely cancels out, you know, if you have and to adopt, that's one thing. The bit about or otherwise any recommendations cancels it out. So I think we should defer it, because I don't hand on heart believe that
amendment.
No, I would like to defer it because, but I'd like to give the reason, because I do not believe, hand on heart,
We've already voted on deferring it and that didn't pass.
everyone can remember 6 different
Thank you,
times.
Sarah, but we've already voted on deferring it. I'm afraid that didn't pass. Do you wish to make an alternative amendment? I'll take that as a no. So, Steve, would you mind just repeating what your motion is, please?
Sorry, I was.
Thank you, Chair. As I said before, I cannot recall any of these motions that we adopted not to accept any recommendations. If presumably we'll find out when we vote on this if councillors feel they cannot recall. My proposal was that we request in items 125 to forgive me, John, you'll correct me, was it 125.4.3, that where the words or otherwise are included, that we delete those and accept the minutes on that basis.
And do I have a seconder for that motion? Sorry, John.
I was just going to say, I believe it was from 125.2.1 through to 125.4.3. Those are the ones to check. Just to point out, I wasn't reading from my notes from the previous meeting and it was unclear. I was just trying to recall and I couldn't completely be clear about it. So I'm sure within my notes I've got the details there.
Thank you, John. Do we have a seconder for Steve's motion? Thank you, Liz. So all those in favour of Steve's motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4, Chair.
All those against?
One, two, three, but I think Sarah and Gary haven't. I think they must be frozen, Chair, just to be aware of that.
Okay, any abstentions?
I think Sarah and Gary are frozen.
In which case the minutes are accepted. And just as a point of information, we have had several days in which to read these and listen to them. So in future, perhaps if people have issues with the minutes, they might want to raise them in advance.
Chair, can I come back on that?
No. Nothing to come back on. So we move to item 5, matters arising.
We've got a new email policy which forbids us from communicating from Friday lunchtime right through till Monday morning. So,
I don't think that's actually been agreed yet, Paul, so it doesn't. And we also have.
It's nice to try to abide by things that people want us to do.
So we're moving to item 5 now. So matters arising. John, would you go through those, please, as briefly as possible?
Thank you, Chair. I certainly will. 5.1, that's the agenda item 10.1. 5.2, that's the agenda item 7.3. 5.3, that's the agenda item 5.9. 5.4, Councillor Norcross to present.
Sorry, can I come in on that one, please?
Which one? If it's item 5.3, we're discussing it as under item 5.9.
Well, we're not discussing.
Correct.
All right, if you want to wait till 5.9.
Yes, we do.
Actually, John, that's in, Paul's quite right. I'm assuming what he's going to say is that it isn't item 5.9, is it? Land registry. No, I beg your pardon. It is actually. No, I'm sorry. It is.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that as far as I'm aware, 5.3 has never been subject to this completely different issue of whether we should voluntarily register our land. We've been trying to get this register together for, I don't know, 7 or 8 months, I think.
Thank you.
And the issue of registering the land is completely separate.
Right. Moving on. Item 5.4.
Don't be so damn rude.
Rodney, please don't be insulting. It's really not necessary and it's very unedifying for everybody watching this.
So
John, could you continue, please?
Okay, 5.4, Councillor Norcross.
We are dysfunctional, there's no doubt about it.
Rodney, if you persist in interrupting, I will have to ask Hazel to mute you, please. So please stop. Thank you.
I'm entitled to give my views.
John, would you like to carry on?
Thank you, Chair. 5.4, Councillor Norcross to present Millennium Award to the Upper Beeding Hub in person when able. Obviously, Chair, you haven't been able at this point, I would assume. 5.5, Clerk to invite PCSOs to a full council meeting. That's ongoing. I did report last time that I'd invited for last meeting and this, or at least attempted to, but they have been unavailable. We will continue to ask. 5.6, councillor responses to be sent to climate change group actioned. 5.7, SPC meeting scheduled to be discussed at personnel committee and brought back to full council. That's the item 8.1. 5.8, internal auditor appointment details to be brought back to full council. We have a meeting planned to talk about questions raised with the internal auditor. We intend to deal with this at the same time. And we had a date, we discussed this at FNGP, or at least I reported at FNGP that we were looking at the 11th of March to progress this one. 5.9, clerk charged with obtaining solicitors' costs to undertake voluntary first registration of SPC land. Update from myself. We have been in communication with the solicitor about this. He has said that, and I quote, "The cost depends upon whether you have title deeds or not. If you let me know this and how many areas are involved, I will give you a fixed price." So we are and have been in the process of going through our records, our deeds, all of our archive information in order to give him the information required. So once he's got it all, he'll be in a position to give us that fixed price, and then we will be able to report back, and then we'll be in a position to obviously move forward with updating the land register also, and that relates to the previous item. Sorry,
Paul, do you want to say something?
Yeah, through you, Chair, could I just ask John whether he's got any idea of when he thinks he might achieve that?
Well, Hazel's doing it, so I might let Hazel speak to this through you, Chair.
Hazel?
I'm working on it. There's quite a lot of papers to go through, but I am working on it. If they were all written in English, it would be helpful, but they're all in solicitor speak, so it's quite difficult, but I'm getting there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hazel. To continue, Chair?
Yes, please.
5.10, approved budget recommendation to be submitted as a precept request to HDC, actioned, obviously. 5.11, new website to be updated and amended as soon as possible. Certainly, there's been many amendments, updates. There's still a fair bit to go, but certainly I think most will agree there's a fair bit of progress from the last meeting. 5.12, newly approved logo to be utilised on SPC publications, other relevant material as soon as possible. That's certainly actioned and well underway. 5.13, Councillor Barling to check on whether cat's eyes no longer being used in road renewals. I didn't know, David, if you wanted to speak to that now or later.
Yeah, I can answer now.
Yes, please. Thank you, David. Yes,
Okay. I spoke to the cabinet member about this, and yes, they are. He knows of no policy to disallow them. So if you've got a road which has got missing cat's eyes, can you email in either to me or to West Sussex Highways, and then it will get some attention.
Lovely, thank you. Tim Rudkin, you had your hand up. Did you want to say something at this point? You're on mute, Tim.
Unmute myself. Actually, yes, because the question says, it says whether cat's eyes are no longer being used in road renewals. Well, I can think of 2 roads that they've renewed and they've done it beautifully, and they put the cat's eyes in. One of which is the one that runs from Partridge Green out to the 24, and they've properly surfaced that and put the cat's eyes in. The other one is the road, if you turn up Park Lane, if anybody knows where it is, but again, it takes you on the road from Cowfold out to the 24. That's all been resurfaced. that has lovely cat's eyes in it. So they do put them in when they resurface the roads.
And thank you. So now we have it from two sources. Marvellous. Can you carry on, please, John?
Thank you, and thank you, David. 5:14, Deputy Clerk to send photos of High Street pothole, manhole cover issues to Councillor Barling. Actioned. Clearly the pothole's been done. I'm not sure if the manhole cover has been progressed. No, we're saying possibly no. 5:15, Clerk to write congratulatory letter to High Street Shop on winning the award. Actioned. 5:16, new F&GP and planning councillor representatives to join their new committees. Actioned. 5:17, 5th January community committee draft minutes to be taken to future full council to be received. That won't be this month because of the number of items on the agenda, but it will be the next opportunity. 5:18, Councillor Lloyd to see if a response to public spaces protection order could be sent in late. I don't know if Tim, you have an update on that one?
Well, I don't have an update that I suspect that we would like to hear, but at the moment the consultation has, as we know, finished. But I'm still waiting for Darren Warsfield to get back to me to tell us whether we could still put ours in while they're while they're looking at the consultations and doing their analysis. But he hasn't come back to me yet. But I am trying to get hold of him, and I'm sure I will. And then what I can do is to let you know, John, and then perhaps you can circulate it around to everybody.
Thank you.
Right, through you, Chair. Absolutely. Yeah. And if I continue, Chair, 5:19, vaccine helpline to possibly go onto visual display boards in Steyning car parks. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yep, I can do that as well. The partnership have been involved with this, and the forum, I believe, in speaking to Horsham, trying to get some form of decision on these screens. I've got a response now at last. It's basically what they're saying is when they put this up, they were never intended as a community notice board and cannot be used for community type messaging. That was what they said right at the beginning. However, what they're looking at internally, they're going to do a complete review of how the tourism messaging is delivered via the boards. And they'll consider both the community partnership and forum's proposal in this review. Obviously, the touchscreen element is now out of play because of COVID. So things are a little better than I think originally the partnership thought they were going to be. So I think with some intervention, they are beginning to sort of rethink it. And I think if we keep that pressure up, hopefully they will agree that we can put some messages up. Not all will necessarily get through. But the key thing is it is apparently quite a complicated program. So it's not as easy as one would think to get it changed. But anyway, I think best to say that it is slowly progressing.
Thank you, Tim. Right, so that brings us to the end of that section. So we'll move on. Oh, sorry, John.
So I was just going to add to what Tim had said there. Really, it was just a note of thanks for Raina and others who have been doing a lot of this for some considerable time, actually, on our behalf and on Steyning as a whole's behalf, just trying to get our message across. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, can we just go back slightly to item 5.17, because what I've realised is that one of the most important things I always understood full council did was to receive the minutes and recommendations, etc., from committees. And I've just noticed that we've got nothing on this agenda at all for any committee. I don't know how many meetings we've had since the last full council meeting, but I think I would have expected quite a few committees to be reporting in, wouldn't I? Is this an accident or is it a deliberate policy, please?
John?
I would say it's not one that we have to do every time. So because of the length of the agenda, I chose to, keep that ongoing for the next time. We did receive a number of minutes clearly last time that covered the previous 3 months. So it's possible to catch up in that way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. David. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
I was just going to say, when there's a delay, even if there's a delay of a month, I think sometimes councillors aren't sure exactly what went on or was said in a meeting. And I think any delay of more than a month is just completely unacceptable, because you can't remember in any detail unless you actually listen to the audio recording.
Thank you for that. I would just simply say that presumably we receive minutes of meetings that have already gone to the meetings to be accepted, so they're accepted there first. Anyway, item 6, David.
Chair, sorry, could I just make one more point on that, which is that the full council meeting is the one where most members of the public come, and it's that meeting where they expect to hear of important things that have been decided by the various committees. And if we're not going to report any of that, then we're taking another step backwards in terms of accountability and transparency and keeping the public informed of what we're doing. I think it's really to be deprecated.
I would just like to clarify that I don't think at any point anyone suggested that we won't be receiving the minutes at some point, just not tonight.
Yeah,
so
well,
anyway,
that's the point. The public shouldn't have to wait months to find out what we
well,
decided.
I think it ill behoves you to criticise other people's approach to minutes and how out of date they are. Moving on.
No, Chair,
David,
that's absolutely a different point entirely.
David,
I always tried to agree
we are
that
moving on
the
now.
one thing that you're not doing is even
discussion,
bringing them before this committee,
David,
this
would you like to
full
give your
council.
report,
Yes, shall I
Yes, please.
carry on now?
Yes, please.
Right, well, I have got a fair few things to comment on, please, Chair. There was a very long and interesting budget county council meeting last Friday. We had several items that may interest members. The first was a report from the Cabinet Member for Children's Services. You may remember that we ran into difficulty about 18 months ago with a very poor inspection report, which led to the appointment of the Children's Commissioner and intervention possibly by the government in setting up a children's trust. Massive work and investment has taken place over those 18 months, leading now, I'm pleased to report, to a situation where for the first time ever, the government has now indicated to us that they won't be requiring that was a stepper at the time. They won't be requiring West Sussex to put the children's services into a trust. That's been postponed while the remainder of the work on the transformation of children's services takes place. I gather that's the first time it's ever happened. So we're rather pleased about that. Massive work's gone on. The second report we had was along the same lines from the Cabinet Member for covering the fire brigade, where again, about 18 months ago, we had a very poor inspection and allegations that there was bullying going on amongst the staff. Well, again, massive work has been undertaken, and now we've had a letter, coincidentally, from the inspectorate, a fire inspectorate, saying they don't wish now to take any further interest in the West Sussex Fire Brigade. They're now satisfied with the progress that we've made. So those are two very big green ticks in the box. The next subject that we talked about, and this was over some length, was our budget. Now, I need to explain the increase that there will be in council tax, which is 4.99% as previous years, which is 1.99% for general increase and 3% for adult social care. Now, to try and put this into some sort of context, we have a revenue budget of £624 million, and we have to balance our budget, or else we really would get into difficulty. And at one point last year, we had a massive funding gap of £43 million, which had gone down to £18 million by Christmas. But luckily, by work within the cabinet, we have reduced that now to a balanced budget with no funding gap for next year. Now, part of that was the increase in council tax, because the government made it clear to West Sussex and indeed to all county councils that their grants, the grants that we get from central government, were based on the fact that council tax would go up in each county council area. So we had no choice, although the administration is a low tax administration, nevertheless, it was prudent to do so. Now, within that, there are considerable new monies available for certain services. On top of a general increase for salaries and things for children's services, there's another £6 million being ploughed into that. In terms of highways, which will be of particular interest to the county council, there's another £6 million for this coming year and another £6 million for the year after. So that's a total capital spending there of another £12 million. And again, in adult social care, we've raised an additional £14.6 million through the 3% levy, which is being ploughed back totally into adult social care. We're rather pleased that the government has been generous to us, and indeed I think to most county councils, in terms of funding for COVID, because everything was diverted to COVID, our resources, our staff, and we've come through hopefully now to the other side, where, as you know, vaccinations in West Sussex have gone on apace, and the numbers in either in hospital or catching it in West Sussex have gone right down. Not enough, but as you know, all the indicators are on the right trajectory. That brings me finally to the question of elections. There will be a county council election this year, together with various by-elections for district councillors around West Sussex and for parish council by-elections, I assume. The elections will be a very unusual election, because you can't go out and knock on doors or deliver leaflets. Party workers can't do that, because that would be breaking the lockdown rules. There's a whole load of things you can and can't do, and I rather amusingly noted that you have to bring your own pencil to the polling station now. It's gone down to a finite art. Anyway, that does seem to be going ahead this May, and we shall see more of that, know more about that, I should think, in the coming month. So in terms of other issues, just that are a bit more local, you've touched on a couple already. There are still difficulties out with the surface of the road out towards Kingsbarn Lane. That's still difficulty. There's been lots of little things that I probably won't mention because they're all small, and I know you've got a full agenda. Shall I leave it there, Joe? And if anybody wants to ask me any questions, I'm happy to assist.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, David. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask David? Rodney?
Yes, David. Obviously, in these budgets, are there any cuts taking place for services? For instance, the bus services. Are they still getting the subsidy that they had last year, or has that been cut?
No, it's been trimmed. I think trimmed is a better word. The county council revenue budget, can I just hold this up? It's gigantic. And it runs to literally there's well over 100 pages. In fact, it's nearly 200 pages. I'm afraid to say that I can't help you in terms of an exact figure, but I could research it if you wanted one.
David, that is concerning, David, that that kind of grant, subsidy, whatever, it's been reduced. You know, because we are a rural area. You know, there's a lot of residents who rely on that to go to work, and also you know, college, uni, everything else. You know,
If I can find the figure during the meeting, I'll wave at Joe or something.
right,
But
okay,
at the moment, I can't find it quick enough.
Yeah, there is another couple of points that I mean. The
Yeah.
other one, David, is that I think that in the past the county council have always given the Horsham a 10 grand grant, you know, to do graffiti cleaning. Now I understand that the county now have stopped doing that, which of course is possibly going to lead to problems. You know, do you know anything about that?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
The trouble is, we're dealing with such a vast budget that it's impossible for a backbencher to hold these things in one's head.
No, I appreciate that, and you know, but obviously we are, you know, representing, you know, residents of Steyning, you know, and so you know we are kind of quite small, as it were. But going back to the bus subsidy, I mean that will affect Bramber and Upper Beeding as well. You know,
I think we've covered the bus subsidy off, Rodney. David's
sorry?
going to see if he can find what the cut in the subsidy is, and he will let us
If
know.
I can find the answer during the meeting, I'll wait.
Thank you. And then the other one, I get residents from Shootingfield having a moan at me for the road surface, not the potholes. The actual surface is bad. It is on a bus route. It is the road to the school. Can something be done there, David? I know again it's money, and you know, but I understand that the county have been given you know, 19-odd million for road potholes and road repairs. Can you see if you can work wonders on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of this because a resident did take it up with me, and of course I know Shootingfield very well. In terms of resurfacing, it's actually incredibly expensive, and there is a program where they work to it. Again, I'd have to look into that as a specific item, and indeed I will look into it if the parish council so wishes. There won't be a bolt of lightning because these programs are worked out in advance, if you see what I mean.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, at some point it will get resurfaced. I just don't know whether it will be in my lifetime.
Well, yeah, but you know, I mean, you know, I don't think the residents of Shootingfield would appreciate that comment, David. I mean, you know, but you know, I know, but I'm only kind of forwarding or passing on messages that residents speak to me about, and you know.
Duly noted. Tim Rudkin, did you want to ask a question? Oh, sorry, actually, sorry, Tim. Deborah had her hand up first. Deborah, and then Tim.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. David, it's the perennial really sort of question. It's the big roundabout down, you know, by Shoreham. And I think about 2 or 3 years ago, you managed to get it resurfaced, especially coming up the road past the quarry. And I wonder whether you could put that on the list of things that need doing again, because the potholes are dreadful on that.
Yeah, they are dreadful. The difference between the two roads, just to make it clear, is that it's not in my division, but I was able to flag it up and get some action, simply because it's an A road which is heavily used in a lorry route, which of course Shootingfield isn't. And therefore, I did manage to get some priority for that. But it's a fair point, Deborah. And again, in the same email that I will send in, I'll mention that too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
David, just a quick one. You know the infamous flooding at Wappingthorne, you know, on the bend there?
Yes.
Yeah, somebody's gone in there and scratched a hole over the gully grating, but there's still a hell of a lot of mess and muck and bullets lying about on top of the gully gratings. I don't know if that could be cleared off.
Well,
might enhance the situation
yeah,
a little.
I've got to visit a couple of elderly people on a mercy, in the nicest way, trying to help them tomorrow. So I'll drive up there, Tim, on my way home.
Thank you, Sarah, and then I think we need to move on.
David, you said that the elections are going to be going ahead. There's probably going to be a lot of residents who've never had a postal vote, who've always gone to the polling station as you know, in person, and then they're going to be faced with a dilemma. Perhaps they don't want to go out, but they have no alternative if they wish to vote other than having a postal vote. Have you any idea how long somebody who's never had a postal vote before, how long it would take for them to actually be allowed to have one? Bearing in mind that
I don't know the exact date, Sarah, but I think there's probably about 2 months to go before they close that. I think you can get a postal vote, pretty easily these days.
So people should be applying now if they're thinking they don't want to go out to vote.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that there will be an upswing in postal voting because it's safe, and there will be a lot of people who do not wish to go to a polling station because even in May, on the 6th of May, it may be that there's still some COVID around, so I can understand that. That's why I say I think it's going to be a very peculiar election. We should just have to wait and see what happens.
I'm sure it will. Thank you very much, David. Thank you for that. You're welcome to stay or welcome.
Yeah, I'll probably turn off for a bit. If I can find the answer about buses, I'll wave at you or something.
Thank you, David.
I am here, but I turn the camera off.
And the graffiti, please, David.
Say again?
As well. The reduction in the graffiti grant as well.
If you can find it in the budget.
Yeah, if I can find it in 200 pages, I'll have a look.
Thank you for that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to item 7, starting with 7.1, which is to discuss and agree the SPC position with regards to Salk and Wasalk, and to agree the councillor representatives to be named on the proxy form and to attend the meeting to be held on the 25th of February. So we've all had the supporting papers. John, do you want to just give us a very brief, just a sort of very brief overview of what this item concerns?
Okay, WASALC, that's the West Sussex Association of Local Councils. They are overarching control and influence on SALC, and we have been associated with them for some time. There is an AGM on the 25th of February. There's another meeting preceding that on the 18th, which gives an idea as to what's going on, but the 25th is the important one. And it's important for our council to be represented at this meeting. I've given out in supporting papers a lot of information. The information has changed one way or another quite a lot over the last few weeks, and even more so in the lead up to this meeting. But where we are at the moment is that we hope to have or agree tonight to the representatives, so that the information that we're given on the night, because we're not sure that we're going to get it before, we can vote based upon that. So we have been informed that we can have 2 representatives. We thought initially that was 2 councillors, and then we were told it could be a councillor and the clerk, and that was the preference. But currently that's unclear, so we might want to agree to 2 representatives, and I'll let you decide what you want to do from there. We do have proxy forms, but we were told initially that we needed to fill them out in advance of the meeting. Most recently, we have been told that we can attend the meeting and give our votes at that point. So as I've said, an idea as to where our voting might want to be could be of benefit tonight. I think that might give you just a brief overview. Joanna, is that okay?
No, that's lovely, John. So I think in the first instance, what we need to do is establish who our representatives are. And given the uncertainty over whether or not John can attend, what I propose is that we nominate Chris, myself and John as the 3 attendees, and then obviously only 2 of us will be going. So then it comes down to, if John is able to attend, it would be either me or Chris and John, or if John isn't, then it'd be me and Chris. Paul.
Yeah, Chair, before we turn to the meat of this, could I just ask 3 questions to just seek some further information, please? The first one relates to the briefing paper 7.1, and it's actually the penultimate paragraph on that document, on page 1 of that document, which says, many parish councils have felt very strongly against WSALC actions and the report that has been sent out. Many have sent in emails requesting information and none has been received. FOIs have not been responded to. Now, frankly, that doesn't sound like the sort of information that we have. This sounds as though it's a bit of an extract from a lobbying paper by SALC. So I just wanted to ask John, through you, Chair, what the source of this information is, please.
John?
The source of the FOIs not being responded to is the fact that we were CC'd in to the original FOI, and then in terms of the response, we've been CC'd into the response or lack of it. And then there has been some follow-up to that, and 1 or 2 unhappy people as to the fact that their FOIs haven't been dealt with in the way that they might expect. In terms of many parish councils have felt strongly against WSALC actions, as I say, we've been CC'd in. There's been a lot of emails going backwards and forwards between clerks, effectively, just trying to work out what's been going on. We're all thinking and hoping there would be a more transparent discussion and information transfer, but that hasn't been forthcoming, and that's been a little bit difficult to deal with, especially because these are the guys who we look to give us advice as to, you know, how we should act in a transparent fashion. And in terms of the original motion below being supported by over 50 parish councils, motion was put forward by 1 clerk and 1 parish, and immediately there was a whole swathe of parishes who chose to agree to that. So there is quite a lot of interest there in a very short period of time. But since that moment, and that was then put on, or attempted to be put on the agenda, and then it was refused. But now, since, there's been another motion being placed on the agenda. As I say, this has been a movable feast, and so I bring it to you tonight, basically with this is where the situation is at the moment. Really, we just need to get to the bottom of the details and the discussion, and we're yet to be told, but hopefully that's what these meetings will brief us with.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I did say I had 3 questions. So number 2 is in the same paragraph, and John's touched on it, where it says some parish councils had requested a motion, blah, blah, blah. The original motion below has been supported by over 50 parish councils to date. So clearly this is a pretty long-running thing, and it's pretty complicated. And I would like to ask why the first we've seen of it is in these supporting papers sent out at 4:30 p.m. on Friday. So at least 50 other parish councils have been debating this, and this is the first we know about it. And we've got precious little time to get a grip on what the issues are. I mean, the other supporting paper, this review of member services, I mean, I, for one, because I don't work over weekends, saw it for the first time this morning. So there's a 13-page report here. How can we be expected to make sensible decisions when we're handed stuff like this at the last minute? So my question really, through you, Chair, to John is, why have we not heard about this in more detail well before 4:30 on Friday?
John, are you able to give an answer to that, please?
Well, as I've said a few times, this has been a movable feast. Things have changed quite a lot in a very short period of time. And that's why I put in brackets on the supporting paper that I eventually completed on the Friday. There were a number of things that changed on Friday of last week, which is why I sent it out at the last possible time, just to make sure it was as up to date as possible. So it's been difficult throughout this. People who have reacted early have often reacted too early because they weren't given all the information. I've chosen rather than give you all the information early, that most of which has been either incorrect or unsubstantiated, wait until such time as we've got something that we can actually discuss. And even that has changed within the last week. So that's why I brought it to you for this meeting.
Thank you. Did you have a third point, Paul?
Well, I'd just like to respond to that, if I may, which is to say, I think we're all capable of taking account of changes at the last minute, but what's very difficult is to take into account the whole story at the last minute. And I think it's quite wrong for John to have taken it upon himself to withhold all the information until 4:30 on Friday. So the third question relates to page 5 of the review of member services, where it says, it's describing the research process, and it says that the interviewees included a random sample of parish clerks and councillors, and then there was some snowballing to consult with others. I'm just seeking an assurance through you, Chair, that neither the clerk's office nor any councillor here today is one of those people.
Well, I'm certainly not. I obviously can't speak for other councillors. John, you can speak for the office, so
No,
will you?
we haven't been involved with that.
Thank you very much.
There is the reassurance. So on that, we kind of move back to my motion, which is that we nominate 3 people to attend, of whom obviously only 2 will go. But what we don't want to end up in a situation whereby we nominate, for example, myself and John, and then we establish that John isn't allowed to attend, so we only have 1 attendee. We need 3. Paul?
Well, I think 2 points really, Chair. The first is that I think that that we should be represented by elected representatives, not by an officer. Number 2, and I'll come back to the reason, one of the chief reasons for that. In fact, I'll deal with it now. Looking at this review of member services arrangements at page 3, one of the main reasons that West Sussex ALC is concerned is set out at paragraph 13, where it says there is a concern among councillors in particular that the current arrangements privileges clerks over councillors, and that the flow of information from provider to clerk to councillors is not as fluid as it could be, and that information blockages exist within the system. Councillors should not be excluded or experience lack of information in any service providing arrangement, which perhaps we've just seen an example of in a slightly, well, in a related way. And also on page 9, section C, I'm not going to read them all out, but you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, the last 4 bulleted points are all to do with this sort of general feeling that SALC is too close to clerks, and insufficient information finds its way through to councillors, which has certainly been my experience over the last 2 years. So given that the issue is one of insufficient accountability, sorry, is Stephen Northam mouthing something?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I was asked I was just wondering how long you're going to go on, because
Well, I'm going
we
to.
were told earlier on that this was going to be a full agenda and asked them to make things brief.
Well, it's
Anything but brief
well.
at
I
the
think we're
moment.
allowed. No, I think I'm allowed to speak for 2 minutes, and I think this is a very important point. And I was making the point that, given that this is the fundamental issue, I think it's very unwise that we would think of sending the clerk along. And the third point is that the agenda item doesn't provide for a clerk; it provides for 2 councillors.
Yeah, that's entirely true. It does only provide for 2 councillors. John, would we be able to include you as a representative, despite the fact it says councillor representatives to be named on the proxy form, etc.?
I think certainly in the first instance, you need to be voting in the 2 councillor representatives either way. You might want to do it on a separate motion just to be certain. You might then agree or disagree on the fact that I could represent the council also, but that would be down to you, Chair. It is on the agenda, so we can,
Okay.
can look at that.
Well, no, it's not. The councillors are. There's no provision for the clerk to be appointed on the agenda.
Thank you for that, Paul. In which case, Hazel.
We have actually been told that clerks can go, and many clerks are going with their chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, John, were we to want to include you as one of our possible representatives, would we have to do that as a separate motion from the councillor representatives?
I would say that you could include it, but just for the sake of keeping things clear and clarity, maybe you want to, on this occasion, vote for the 2 councillor representatives separately. And the fact that it is on the agenda, and we are looking at this and any other matters that may arise, then you could say a separate motion that you wanted to include me or otherwise.
Right. Well, in that case, and I'm conscious of time and how much we have to get through, I would just like to propose a motion, that the first motion, which is that myself and Councillor Young are the two councillor representatives for this meeting. Do I have a second of that? Steve?
Sorry, Chair. Before you go ahead with that, of course, if you do that, then that potentially precludes John from going along. And as Hazel, as we've heard from Hazel, it does seem to be that other clerks are accompanying the chairman, which personally I think is a good idea.
So do I, as it happens.
So I think if you vote that way, if you hold a motion that way, you might then preclude John of going, because I would much suggest maybe we have a motion that says, I think as originally intended, that you put forward 3 names, any 2 of which can go, or all 3 if necessary, if possible.
John, can we do that? I mean, that would be my preference.
Yeah, I would actually tend to agree with Steve and your original suggestion. Otherwise, we'd get tied up, and then you would have to go as councillor representatives, no matter what the situation was at the time.
Well, in that case, unless you have anything very significantly new to say, Paul, I'm going to move to propose that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to suggest an amendment, or at least raise a point and ask you, Chair, to consider how to deal with this, because the most important thing is not really who goes, it's what they're going to do when they get there.
Well, I think in the first instance, we need to determine who's going to go.
Well, I was just going to ask whether you are intending to move on from this to give whoever is elected terms of reference, because if not, then I would like to propose an amendment that they need terms of reference before they go. Because, as I say, who goes is almost by the by. We as a council need to decide what our view is on this controversy.
We do indeed, which is why I'm trying to move this on quite quickly. Because
well, that's why I asked you the question, Chair, what your intention was.
Thank you, Paul. My intention was, as I thought I had made clear at the beginning of this, and clearly I hadn't, that in the first instance, we would determine the representatives, and then we would move on to try and determine how those representatives would vote on behalf of SPC.
Okay,
So-
Chair. In that case, I propose an amendment that whoever is appointed, it is subject to terms of reference being given.
Do we have a proposer for Paul's proposal? A second?
No, that's what I'm proposing it. Perhaps it's a seconder that's needed for the amendment.
Yes,
Chair.
I've just said, do we have a seconder? Rodney, you're seconding it.
Yeah, I'll second it.
All those in favour of Paul's motion?
Sorry,
see,
sorry, Chair, if I may. The way that's worded is subject to terms of reference. So if no terms of reference are agreed for whatever reason, they won't go.
Well, that's precisely the point.
Can I interject here at all, Chair? We've spent a lot of time and a lot of taxpayers' money moving away from terms of reference to the scheme of delegation. And now Councillor Campbell is doing a U-turn and taking us back to terms of reference. I don't think we need any terms of reference at all.
no, I'm sorry. I think we need to move on with this because it's already 8:30. And we've already spent a considerable amount of time talking about this. So Paul has proposed an amendment and Rodney has seconded the amendment. So all those in favour of Paul's amendment?
That's 3, 4, Chair.
All those against?
I've got 4 against.
Any abstentions?
1, 2, 3 abstentions. I think Sarah and Gary are frozen.
Okay, so I'm afraid am I right, John, that amendment didn't pass?
Didn't pass, Chair.
Thank you.
We voted for it. With our hands up.
Are we still frozen?
Not anymore. Apparently they voted for it, so where does that leave us?
Yeah.
But can we do it again then, please?
Okay, can we do it again briefly because we have a lot of other things to talk about. All those in favour of
Close your eyes, Joanna.
Rodney, don't talk to me. Stop interrupting me, Rodney. It's tiresome and unedifying. All those in favour of Paul's amendment?
That's okay. 5-4, Chair.
All those against Paul's amendment?
Surprise, surprise.
Hang on, 1, 2, 3. I've got 5 against.
Any abstentions?
Got 1. Sorry, Deborah, have you voted? Was that an abstention, Deborah?
Sorry, I voted against.
I didn't pick that up. I'm sorry. So I think that was 5-4, 5 against, 1 abstention, and then I think it was Deborah that I didn't pick up. So that would be 5-4, 6 against, 1 abstention.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm afraid that motion didn't pass. So moving on.
Well, surprise, surprise.
Thank you for that, Rodney. Moving on, I propose that we nominate 3 people to attend as representatives. We have a pool of 3 people, of whom 2 will attend. And I propose that those 3 people are myself, Chris Young, and John.
Second that.
Yeah, can we go through the proper process for could you perhaps invite others who might want to put themselves forward, and then we go through the correct
we haven't got time.
election? Well, that's the correct process set out in our standing orders.
Yeah. That's right, isn't it, Tim Lloyd? Tim Lloyd, you're muted.
Thank you, Rodney. Tim, you're on mute, Tim.
On a point of order, Chair, we are, or you are, nominating, and we are nominating people to represent us, so we don't have to go through an election process.
Well, I'm nominating. I'd like to nominate myself.
Well, fine. If you want to put yourself forward, then that's absolutely fine. Then put a proposal and get a seconder.
I've already put forward a motion
Yeah.
I'll
and it's been
second it.
seconded.
Uh,
So I
We've
move
got
to a vote on my
hang on.
motion.
No, I'm sorry, Chair. Our standing orders, paragraph 8, set out how to vote on appointments. And this is not in accordance with that. Perhaps you'd ask the clerk to advise.
What about
Thank you, but Rodney, you're not the clerk. John, could you advise, please?
Well, how can he advise? How can he advise?
Rodney, I didn't ask you to speak, so
Sorry.
please don't.
I mean, John can't advise us.
Hazel, can you please mute Rodney as he's persisting in interrupting? Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to suggest that there's a procedure before you can mute, and it's set out in standing orders.
John?
Well, shall I say Steve first and then I'll come in, Chair?
Yeah, let's have Steve first.
Thank you, Chair. Can I propose under Standing Order 2B that as Councillor Goldsmith has repeatedly ignored the Chair's request to behave properly in the meeting, can I propose that he no longer be heard at this meeting?
You certainly can. Do I have a seconder for that motion? All those in favour of that motion?
That's 6-4, Chair.
All those against?
It's the proper process, I think, that Mr. Councillor Campbell was
absolutely.
requesting.
That's 5 against.
Any abstentions?
1 abstention.
The motion has passed. Hazel, can you please mute Rodney? Thank you. John, what is the process for determining the representatives tonight for this?
Well, you have put a motion forward, and within it you have nominated 2 councillors to represent. Councillors can agree or otherwise that. In terms of the discussion, it could be that other nominations are suggested. It could be an amendment based upon that, or you could simply vote on the motion that you have put forward, and if it's not agreed, then it could be that there's a vote put forward for other nominations, Chair.
Thank you. Well, in the interest of time, as we've already spent a lot of time talking about this, and I put forward a motion, and I believe it was seconded. Was it seconded, John?
It was seconded by Simon.
Thank you. Well, in that case, can I have a
Chair,
vote on
this
the
is
motion,
completely
please?
wrong. If there is more than one nomination
Paul, did
for
I
a
ask, were
post,
you invited to
then,
speak?
well, I'm just giving you the benefit of Standing Order 8. John has just completely misrepresented what it says. I'd invite John to read it out and then explain it, please, Chair.
John, do you stand by the advice you've just given us?
Shall I read out Standing Order 8?
Yes. And then
Voting on appointments where more than 2 persons have been nominated for a position to be filled by the council, and none of those persons have received an absolute majority of votes in their favour. The name of the person having the least number of votes shall be struck off the list and a fresh vote taken. The process shall continue until a majority of votes is given in favour of one person. A tie in votes may be settled by the casting vote, exercisable by the chairman of the meeting. As such, you put forward 2 nominations for 2 positions. There weren't any other nominations at that point.
Oh.
Right.
No, come on.
No,
Look, it says here the motion on the agenda is to agree the councillor representatives, and I am nominating myself. So there are now 3 councillor representatives nominated for 2
Okay, let's
positions,
start.
and it needs to be put to a vote, please, Chair.
Right. Well, okay. In that case, we have 4 nominations in effect. So briefly, all those in favour of myself being one of the representatives, please vote now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 7 votes for you, Joe.
All those in favour of Chris Young, please vote now.
No, Chair, you can't vote twice.
Of course you can vote twice.
No, you can't. Can you invite John to read the standing order again?
Read the standing order
Hazel
again,
was
John.
just talking.
Would you mind reading it one more time, John?
For one candidate.
Yes,
Each
quite. So
councillor
everybody has
votes
voted
one
for
candidate.
one of the three. So 7 people have just voted
John,
for
would you mind
Joanna.
just,
So
John,
they
would you mind
cannot
just
vote
reading the
again.
standing order again, please?
Where more than 2 persons have been nominated for a position to be filled by the council and none of those persons have received an absolute majority of votes in their favour, the name of the person having the least number of votes shall be struck off the list
Right.
and a fresh vote taken.
Okay, no, that's enough. Okay, so 7 votes for me. At no point does it actually say that each councillor has only 1 vote, does it?
Chair, that is exactly the position. That's what we've done countless times.
Oh, gosh.
John, does
Rubbish.
it at any point in the standing order say that a councillor only has 1 vote?
Well, how can you
And we
vote
are
for
voting
3
for more than
people?
one-
No, you
and we are
can't vote
voting-
again
John,
and again when you've got 3
Paul,
nominations.
would you please stop interrupting?
Well, this is just...
Chair,
please
sorry, on a
stop
point of order, can we please move on? We have spent 20
I
minutes
couldn't
on the
agree
most
more.
pointless exercise.
Utterly
We're
agree.
overcomplicating something which is really quite simple, and there are lots of other things that we need to
I
discuss.
absolutely agree.
Well, can we just do the correct procedure, which is
John,
everybody votes
Paul,
for
would
candidate
you
1,
please stop
then they vote,
interrupting,
then
or
the
I will
remaining
move-
people
I
vote
will
for
move to the
2, and the
same
remaining
standing
vote for
order.
3.
Chris, did you want to say something?
Well, just if there are 2 places, surely each councillor has 2 votes.
Precisely.
1 for each place. So we should all
We
have
have 3 votes.
Yeah, there are 3 places, we have 3 votes. John?
Yes, what Paul is saying, we have done it that way previously, but it doesn't say and state that that's precisely the way we ought to do
Right,
it.
thank you.
What
That's
it does
fine. In which
say
case,
is
there are
that
3
the name of
places.
the person having the least number of votes shall be struck off the list and a fresh vote
We
taken.
have 3 votes. We have 3 votes because there are 3
Can't
places.
have 3 votes, it's impossible.
Okay, Paul, if you persist in interrupting, I will move to use the same standing order that was moved against Rodney. So, all those in favour of Chris, please vote now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4.
Right, all those in favour of Paul.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And I would like it minuted, please, Chair, that I believe that a completely improper process has been adopted because you cannot have 3 votes for 3
Duly
vacancies.
noted.
It's ridiculous.
All those in favour of John, because we have 3 places, potentially.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 4.
Right, so on that basis, our representatives are 2 of myself, Chris and John. Right, I propose that we spend no more than 10 minutes discussing the position that our representatives are going to take at this meeting, because we have a lot of other things that we need to get through that are extremely important, and we've already spent a lot of time on this. So, basically, is the position, John, I'm assuming here that what we're actually going to be discussing briefly here is what position SBC wishes to take vis-a-vis us, vis-a-vis West Sussex, West Suffolk, joining either with Hampshire or voting for the motions that we have in front of us that were sent through. Is that correct, John?
Well, it might be best to look at the proxy form. And certainly the ones that we are looking at. 9, agenda item 9.2, that Terry Oliver and Michael Beale be removed from the office as directors of the company with immediate effect, 25th February. Special resolutions, 9.1, special resolution in respect of the purchase of governance services for the Hampshire Association of Local Councils. Then agenda item 9.1, special resolution in respect of working with East Sussex Association of Local Councils to re-establish a Sussex Association and to receive joint governance arrangements through a single service. And I think those are the main ones to consider, Chair.
So basically, we need to decide whether or not we want to vote for or against those motions, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so does anyone have any strong views either way on this? Any strong feelings about it? Tim, Lloyd?
Yeah, can I just make a suggestion, please? Could we come back to this? Because we've got other things to discuss here, and I'm just concerned we're going to spend more than 10 minutes on whether we agree with something or whether we don't. And if we don't have time at the end, well, we don't have time. We've got lots of other important things to discuss.
Okay, well in that case, I am going to exercise the chairman's right to slightly change the order on the agenda. And we do have a lot of other very important things to consider. And I think that in this instance, at the moment, the most important one is item 8, which is the parish council meeting schedule, because that needs to be agreed or otherwise today. So that's item 8.1, which is to discuss and agree the 2021-22 SPC meeting schedule as recommended by the Personnel Committee. Now, we've all had sight of it because it came through as a supporting paper. So we all know what it's saying, basically, and what's on there. The Personnel Committee recommendation is that we accept the revised meeting schedule. So obviously, because not everybody here tonight was at the Personnel Committee or is part of it, for those of you who are either not members or weren't there, now is your opportunity to talk or make a point or ask a question. Tim.
Just a quick one. We're talking about 8 meetings in the briefing paper, yet the Personnel Committee's decision, I think, was 5 meetings. Have I got that wrong? We've got the 4th of May, 5th of October, 3rd of May, 18th of October, and the 10th of January, which is 5 meetings.
Which one? Sorry, which are you looking at?
Well, the recommendations of the Personnel Committee at the bottom of the briefing paper.
That the following.
I mean, it's probably a moot point.
No, they were to be removed.
Yeah, which means 8 meetings less per year.
Yes.
Plus 10 less from not having premises meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see. I got it. It's a multiples. Sorry, I understand.
Yep.
So to send it, well, Rodney, I'm afraid we've already voted not to hear from you again, so it's going to make it quite challenging, really. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say before I move to a vote on this?
I think it's.
Oh.
Well, yes, Chair, because there seems to be implementing something that was recommended by James Corrigan. And what he was very, very careful to say was that everything needed to be implemented in tandem. This wasn't a question of picking and choosing things. And we've got ourselves into a situation where already we're struggling to get through meetings. In fact, we rarely succeed in getting through the agendas we've got. And that's already leaving out significant matters, as we've done this evening and as we do at every community meeting. F&GP is the one that seems to get fairly near. Well, in fact, I think we do generally conclude that one, but we have things left off it. And, you know, it's not really surprising, is it, if the council goes to somebody who is the former advisor to the Clerks Union over, please, councillor, who goes to.
I think you've made that point in several previous meetings.
Well, I'd like to make it now because it's relevant to
2 minutes, so
it's relevant to our discussion. So there are those of us who have been very closely involved with the council who perceive that there is an issue with us having an untrained clerk who is not delivering. Now, whether that's right or wrong should be determined by somebody else. We were going through a process at HR Resources.
Don't interrupt, Joanna.
No,
Rodney, Hazel, can you mute Rodney, please? Thank you.
we're talking about something extremely relevant because.
No, we're not.
Well, we are, because what Mr. Corrigan has effectively done is make recommendations which result in us being sidelined as councillors and reducing the number of meetings when we're already not succeeding in managing the council's affairs is a recipe for absolute disaster. And end of, that's all I need to say.
Thank you. Tim, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I think Councillor Campbell's gone completely off piste as far as this is concerned. This is not supposed to be a criticism of the clerk. The meeting schedule that we put together was discussed at length by the Personnel Working Party. And what we've seen today is a typical example of certain councillors talking out a particular item. Now, I don't think this is the right way that the council should actually be working. We should be working as a team. And if people have a query on something or a question, they should raise that prior to the meeting if they can, say, for instance, with the minutes of a meeting, so that they can raise that query and it can be quickly dealt with instead of a lengthy discussion, which we've had tonight, on something that really is a very simple process. And in my view, it's been deliberately talked out. And I think we should stop all this. It really isn't very edifying for the public. And we really have a lot of other very important things that we should discuss. And frankly, we should just give 5 or 10 minutes to each item and then we move on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. I completely agree. Simon, do you have something?
I completely concur with Tim there. I mean, effectively, the public can see with their own eyes. Certain councillors do talk things out when those councillors are absent.
Simon, much as I'm loath to interrupt you, with all due respect, if your point is to agree with Tim, which I'm sure Tim would appreciate, but as I said at the beginning of the meeting, if people could only raise new points rather than simply agree with other people.
It's evident that when certain councillors are missing from the meetings, we've always completed the meetings when they've been involved.
That's fine, but I don't wish to get into, I don't think we should be criticising each other like that. It's not helpful. Paul, do you have anything else to add?
Well, yes, I'd just like to exercise a right of reply, given that both you, Chair, and Councillor Lloyd have criticised my integrity over this by both agreeing that that I've been deliberately talking things out. Absolutely not. The thing that's taken most time is this very complicated West Sussex controversy, which we were given the briefing papers for after hours on Friday.
Made that point, Paul.
Right, so I would like the attack on my integrity withdrawn.
Well, I'm not aware that I made an attack on your integrity, so I'm not withdrawing anything. Tim, do you wish to withdraw?
No, I didn't name him. I've just said certain councillors.
Thank you. Well, in that case, I think
well, we know exactly who you meant.
We have a recommendation in front of us. So I move that we accept the recommendation. So I move that we accept the meeting schedule, the revised meeting schedule as recommended by the Personnel Committee. Do I have a seconder for that motion, please? Liz, I think you were probably first.
I think Liz.
So all those in favour, please.
7-4, Chair.
All those against?
5 against, Chair.
Any abstentions?
That's the 12.
Lovely. That has then carried. So we now have the revised meeting schedule. Before we return to the governance matters, I'd like to move on to item 9.1, because that's also quite pressing. 9.1 is, for the benefit of those people who don't have the paperwork in front of them, to discuss and agree to appoint 3 councillors to sit on an FOI panel. Councillor representatives should not be the same as those who made judgment on the original request on the last FOI panel, and the panel will be to convene on the 18th or 19th of February. So we need 3 councillors for that, and I am proposing myself and Chris Young, and I would like volunteers for from anyone else who is eligible to sit on it, please? Steve?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Paul?
I'm nominating
You can't
myself,
nominate
please.
yourself, so. Sorry?
I'm nominating myself, please.
You can't sit on the panel, I'm afraid, because you sat on the original panel. So according to our regulations, you cannot sit on the review panel.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that. Well, it doesn't
make.
make clear what it is that's being appealed against.
Well, you were on the FI.
I didn't know that, so that's fine.
Okay, so unless there are any other nominations, please. So my motion is that the review panel consists of myself, Chris Young, and Steve Northern. Sarah, you've got your hand up. Sarah?
Oh, I haven't.
It's Sarah. Sorry. Can I just say apologies, but sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you hear?
Yes.
You can. Sorry, apologies, but our internet keeps dipping out speed. I keep getting frozen and we're losing connection.
We've lost you again.
Just so you all know.
Okay.
I'll second your motion, Joanna.
So you've seconded it, thank you. So please can I have a vote? All those in favour of my motion, please?
7-4, Chair.
All those against? Abstentions?
Two, three, four. 4 abstentions.
Okay.
And Rodney hasn't voted that I could see.
How can you?
Okay. Right, so that's item 9 dealt with. So we'll now go back to, I think in the interest of, we'll return to 7.1 last. So we'll go to 7.2, which is to discuss and agree the working practices group recommendation in regard to whether residents have the option to remain anonymous when asking questions at SPC meetings, as per the supporting papers. So I presume you've all seen the supporting paper?
Yep.
So the recommendation is, if my memory serves, is that people have the right to remain anonymous if they so wish. So we would obviously encourage people to give their names if they would. Have you all got the recommendation? Members agreed to recommend the following. I'm not going to read it out because it's quite long and we should all have it anyway.
Chair, sorry, in the interest of the public, I think you should read it out.
Okay.
Sorry,
Okay,
it's then on the recording.
The recommendation is members agreed to recommend the following: that members of the public should be able to remain anonymous in our live meetings, the same as we might expect in, quote, normal meetings held at the Steyning Centre, where people did not need to give their names when asking a question. On Zoom, if someone needs to ask a question anonymously, they can just use their audio facility. And if there is a question that really requires a written response, then residents can be told to pass their contact details to the clerk and receive that response without the concern that their names are made public, therefore protecting their personal data. That is the recommendation. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've already made this point by email, which is that the briefing notes which are quoted here, which were given to the working party, to my mind are inadequate in that, firstly, they address the wrong question because the advice apparently sought resulted in the answer, there is nothing in law that requires a member of the public to identify themselves when asking a question. No, of course not. We know that. The correct question is, can the parish council be forced to answer anonymous questions? And what John omitted from this briefing paper was that this was discussed with the monitoring officer at Horsham, who was very supportive of it being appropriate not to receive anonymous questions. And they went to the trouble to research other parish councils or other councils rather, and they pointed out that it was common practice to do it. So basically the wrong question has been asked. The question is, should we subject ourselves to being questioned anonymously? And I would invite those who came up with this recommendation to give an example of a single organisation that accepts anonymous questions, and to explain the point of principle as to why Steyning Parish Council would want to be subjected to anonymous questions. Anonymised is fine. If somebody has a good reason to remain anonymous, then they can write into the clerk, giving their name and address, just as one does with a newspaper, and request that the name and address is withheld from the question when given. And if there's a good reason, that'll be fine. But as I say, anonymised to my mind is fine. Anonymous, I don't know why we would think that that was a good idea. As I say, I invite those who recommended this to let us know what the thinking is.
Well, I can answer that because I was on this particular panel. My view is that we would encourage people to give a name, but if they choose to remain anonymous, then I think that's entirely their right. I wouldn't feel subjected to anything from somebody wishing to remain anonymous. Equally, somebody can give a name and I have no means of verifying that it is their real name. It is quite possible, Paul, that somebody could give their name as Paul Campbell. I wouldn't know. We're not going to ask people to prove their identity any more than we would do if we were at a meeting in the Steyning Centre and somebody stood up and said they weren't prepared to give their name. It's not ideal. The preference would be for people to give their names, but none of us felt comfortable with compelling people to give a name. Simon,
nobody's compelled because they're not compelled to ask a question in public.
Paul, I didn't. Please, thank you.
It would also be a breach of GDPR.
Oh, no,
because people's names is covered by GDPR. Anything that can identify an individual, and one would like to think your name is probably the biggest identifier we have, is covered and protected by GDPR. So it would be against ICO regulations.
Steve.
Thank you. Yeah. Actually, Joanna, I think in this discussion, you may remember that I do have some sympathy for the view that that Paul expressed just now, that we should not be in a position where we have to answer anonymous questions. So although that's what the committee came up with, you might remember that I did voice some concern about that, and I would actually be in support of saying, you know, if somebody wants to ask a question anonymously, they shouldn't expect an answer. You're right, we can't compel somebody to give their name, but and no doubt people can make a statement just as they can in our face-to-face meetings in the Steyning Centre. But if they expect an answer, then I don't think it should be anonymous.
Fair enough. Sarah, and then Chris. Sarah? Okay, we'll come back to you because you've frozen again. Chris?
Just to say, if people ask a question in this live forum, then they do so with their picture showing. So they're not exactly anonymous.
With
Sarah, can you hang on a minute? Sorry,
can you hear me okay? I agree with what Councillor...
If you're just going to agree with Paul, I think we've covered that off. We already established, I asked at the beginning of the meeting that people say something additional rather than a simple agreement. Do you have anything else you wish to say, Sarah?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was going to say, I agree with Councillor Northern. In a face-to-face meeting, you do actually see somebody, even if you can't see them. We could have someone coming along and making really racist remarks or something, and we wouldn't have a clue who it was. Whereas people would perhaps behave a little bit better if they did feel that you could actually, in a face-to-face meeting, they'd feel more accountable to what they're saying.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. Yes, when we had our face-to-face meetings, and before we changed it sort of 18 months ago, we very often had people come who got up and didn't say their name, and we accepted their questions. We equally had people who got up who we knew and we did mention their names, which perhaps we shouldn't have done. So it's been a bit of a hodgepodge. Personally, I think we should assume that this is like having a normal meeting and somebody would get up and not say their name. Equally, we're under no obligation to respond to that question in public. We can therefore ask them that we will respond to them if they would like to send us their answer on an email, and we can, or by letter, then we can respond to it.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything in the recommendation that says that we are committing ourselves to answer a question. We're simply committing ourselves to not insisting that people give their names, and we can then choose. Does anyone else have anything to add before we move forward? Paul?
I just wanted to come back on Councillor Alexander's point. He's completely wrong about that. The GDPR does not prevent the publication of a person's name and address if they give it or not, if they give it at a public meeting. And we've had advice from Horsham's monitoring officer on that, and I would prefer to accept that rather than Councillor Alexander's advice.
I may very quickly, Chair, just coming back on that, the ICO actual website, and I'm quoting from the website now, if an individual is directly identifiable from the information, this may constitute as personal data.
This is personal data, but they've implicitly given consent by asking a public question.
I think we've discussed this enough. Yeah, I think we've established that none of us are comfortable with people remaining anonymous, but we can't force people to give their names, and our preference would always be that they will give a name, and that we're not committing ourselves to necessarily answering the question. We are just committing ourselves to not compelling people to give their names.
Well, Chair, that's not quite what this recommendation says so far as written responses are concerned.
Well, if it's a written response, then they'd have to give a name, wouldn't they? It doesn't necessarily have to be their real one. Deborah.
Sorry. Well, I have a slight problem actually with it because, sorry, I went off. I don't know what happened. The thing is that when we're in the Steyning Centre, people can stand up and ask a question, and they cannot say their name. However, they are seen by all the councillors, the clerk and so on, and all the other people who are in the Steyning Centre. So in a way, it's not anonymous, but they haven't given their name. Now, the next one was that if we use, if we say they can ask on the audio, I would say that probably their name is on the audio as well, because if they've asked to clock into the Zoom and they weren't asking a question, even though they might have their video turned off, I believe that their name will still be up on the screen for an audio. But I do think it's okay to email the clerk, but and obviously the clerk has then an email, contact, name. But I don't believe that anybody should ask anything, answer anything that's anonymously sent to the clerk.
John, did you want to say something? I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, we ask, thank you, Chair, we ask people to turn on their video in the same way as we do in a public meeting, so they would be recognisable. It wouldn't be that they'd be asking a question, Deborah, with the video off.
I think
sorry, it does say that.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think the point is that, and if someone needs to ask a question anonymously, they can just use their audio facility.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So I would suggest that perhaps what we might want to do is remove that facility, so that if people want to ask a question without giving their name, we can still see who they are, which would then deal with Sarah's very valid point actually about anonymity, and people might feel more comfortable saying things that are unacceptable.
Yeah.
Steve and Chris, and then I
thank you, Chair. I wonder if I could just try and propose something to simplify this and move through it. And I've just written, and I can send this on chat because I've just written it there, saying that. In fact, I'll send it now. I think. Trying to. Saying simply, members of the public may remain anonymous at all council meetings, but the council reserve the right not to respond to any question that is anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would be very happy with that. Does anyone have any objection to that as a proposal?
To the amendment.
Second it.
Amendment?
I'll second Steve's amendment there.
Okay, so if you're ready, John, can we all vote on Steve's amendment? All those in favour of Steve's amendment?
That's unanimous, thank you.
Lovely.
Steve.
So we move to 7.3, which is to discuss and agree the Working Practices Group recommendation to amend the scheme of delegation concerning the management of maintenance contracts as per the.
Joanna, can I just say that David said he's got an answer on the buses?
Oh, we lost him. Or is he still with us? I think he's gone actually, hasn't he?
Oh, has he gone?
He's left, yeah.
Oh, okay. He did have an answer on the buses, but he didn't leave it.
Could we get it out of him and then circulate it to everyone if possible, please?
Yeah.
Thank you, Basil.
I asked him for it actually. I asked him for it on the chat. So.
Okay, so 7.3. So the recommendation on 7.3 is, for those who haven't got it in front of them, the members agreed that although the clerk has the management responsibility of the maintenance contracts and F&GP stroke community oversee those contracts appropriate to that committee, there could be more clarity. Therefore, the following amendment to the scheme of delegation was proposed by way of a recommendation to full council. And the amendment is such that after the words management of maintenance contracts, it's then added, and where necessary to enter into new contracts using the procedure laid out within the SPC finance regulations policy. Is everyone happy with that?
Nobody's got an objection. I'll second it.
Okay.
Sorry, Joanna, were you proposing that?
Yes, I'm proposing that.
Okay.
Simon, are you seconding it?
I'll second.
So can I have all those in favour of that amendment?
That's unanimous, thank you.
Lovely, so that's 7.6. So this brings us to item 7.4. I'm sorry, I'm just rummaging around trying to find the relevant bit of paper. 7.4 is to discuss and agree the Personnel Committee recommendation to achieve paying a real living wage as per the supporting papers. And again, I'll read the recommendation rather than all of it. So the recommendation is that the committee recommends that the council strives towards paying the real living wage, investigating the cost to move towards paying an increased rate rather than join the Living Wage Foundation, the strategy to be discussed within the budget process over the next 2 years. Paul.
Chair, could whoever recommended this or somebody from that group just explain the 2-year period, because it seems a very long time to me.
Steve, would you speak to that?
Yes, certainly. I said, I think really to make this happen all in one go may or may not be possible. If it's possible in next year's budget, then great, albeit. So it doesn't have to be strung out over 2 years. If you wanted to reword, amend it to reword that's fine. But it's not an absolute must be 2 years. But it does recognise that the budget may be tight and may not be able to achieve this. So we didn't have the information really on what would it cost in one go. So I think that's why we've said it should be investigated, investigating what is the cost.
Can I just ask whether Steve or the rest of the group would be happy just to delete the words over the next 2 years, which would then mean that it was dealt with in the budget process. Hopefully that would mean in the next budget process. But if it wasn't, then clearly it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years. But
yeah,
rather than
wouldn't object.
suggest a 2-year target. So if everyone's happy with that, I'd like to propose that as an amendment to remove those words.
I mean, I'll second that. Propose that amendment, Steve. Sorry, Paul. So can we have we need a vote, obviously, on Paul's amendment. So all those in favour of Paul's amendment?
Unanimous, thank you, Chair.
So presumably, John, that means that we've dealt with that item?
Yep.
Lovely.
Sorry, do we not have to vote on the substantive motion? Have I got that wrong?
No,
John, do we need to vote
only on the amendment.
Just the amendment. It's been unanimously agreed.
Lovely. Okay, 7.5, to discuss and agree the Personnel Committee recommendation to not furlough any staff. Again, as per the supporting papers. And just here we are. So again, for the benefit of those people who don't have this in front of them, I will read it out. Councillor Norton proposed, seconded by Councillor Alexander, that the committee, having discussed this and in view of the government's advice on public sector employers and the fact that the hours for caretakers have already been cut by 50%, and with the received grants to cover some of the loss of income for the Steyning Centre, the Personnel Committee are therefore not recommending any staff to be furloughed. Tim.
Yeah, sorry, but by way of explanation again for the public and for the record on the recording, it might be a good idea to read out that second paragraph, which gives the background as to the decision.
Yep, no, I'm happy to do that. So I'll just read it out for those of you who haven't got it or haven't seen it. The committee thoroughly discussed the options of furloughing staff and the government's information concerning applications from the public sector. It also noted that £12,000 worth of grant aid had been applied for and successfully obtained from HGC due to loss of income, with a further £9,000 due to be applied for before the end of the current lockdown period. Also, if staff were furloughed, it was noted that should the Steyning Centre become a vaccination hub, this would create cover issues in the short term, as there is a minimum period for staff to be on the scheme and therefore unavailable. And it's for that reason, I mean, that's obviously a précis of the discussion that took place, but it's for that reason that we recommended that staff should not be furloughed. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I just need to please understand it a bit better. The possibility of it becoming a vaccination hub is given. That wouldn't be happening overnight, I don't think. And in fact, I think it's pretty clear it's not going to be a vaccination hub. And I'm not sure about this, but I believe the minimum period for furloughing is month to month. So that doesn't really seem to be much of a reason. I mean, the problem I see it, as I see it, is that we've got a lose-lose here. We've got staff who have lost 50% of their pay, and it's costing 50%. It's costing us 50% of their pay. So they've lost 50%, and it's costing us 50%. If we furloughed them, they would get 100% of their pay, and it would cost us 20% of their pay to top it up from the government's 80% to their 100%. So I'm not clear why we've gone for a lose-lose rather than a win-win.
John, can I just clarify that the staff that we're talking about here, who are now on 50%, are actually working, aren't they?
Yeah, the one, through you, Chair, sorry, answer your question, Paul. The one difference being that in terms of furloughing, they wouldn't be doing any work. So the work they are undertaking for us is important for us, and we are paying for it. And that amounts to approximately 50%, one way or another, give or take. And also we have asked them their preference, and their preference is that they have work and they they get the money for the work that they are undertaking. Also, it means that we have access to them at a moment's notice. If, for example, a member of staff goes ill, and we have one at the moment, then someone else can take over from the essential work that they are doing, and that is cleaning the public toilets. This is just an example. If they were furloughed, we wouldn't be able to ask them. So suddenly either the public toilets wouldn't get cleaned, or we'd have to bring in someone contracted, a contractor or something like that. So this gives us the flexibility that we felt we needed. That was just one of the things that we discussed. Yeah.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to say before we move to this? Sarah.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear. John, did you just say that the employees have said, the employees have said they would rather have 50% than 100% of their wage? Is that what you just said?
They have said that they would
They'd
prefer.
rather-
They have said they would prefer not to be furloughed. Yes.
Okay. Unless anyone else has anything else, I propose that we move.
Sorry, can I just clarify whether the caretakers were, or actually all the relevant staff, whether when their views were sought, it was indicated that they would be getting the furlough money of 80% or the furlough plus voluntary top-up from the council to make it 100%? Because that clearly would make a big difference to someone's decision, I would think.
John?
We didn't go through all the exact details because, of course, it was very difficult to work out what those details were. At the time, we weren't involved with furloughing because there were works that had to be done, such as the cleaning of the playgrounds and the cleaning of the toilets and the allotments and also the works at the Steyning Centre. So, you know, this again has been a very movable feast chair, but at the time we asked them their opinion and that's what they told us.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, just to point out that actually these you know, the issues of whether staff were asked or not, it doesn't really go to the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter and the main reason for the recommendation here is that if you read the government's advice about local authorities and furloughing, if we were to furlough staff, we are more than stretching, in the opinion of the personnel committee, more than stretching the government's advice. So I think we would be unsuccessful in any case.
Okay, thank you. Paul, briefly.
Well, just to point out that Seaford, for example, have made a successful claim for the grant, plus they've furloughed people, because the basic provision is if you get a significant proportion of your income from something like the Steyning Centre, which pays for the wages, then you're eligible, which is precisely the situation as I see it. And I just wanted to come back to this consultation point. It seems from what John's saying that the consultation with the employees was a long, long time ago, before all the rules changed, so that the period of furloughing is shorter, the ability to pay 100% is now there. I just invite clarification from John as to when this consultation with the employees took place.
Can you say when it was, John, roughly? Do you have, if you know, I mean, not the precise date, but approximate month?
Hazel asked the question. She might have a better.
Sorry, Hazel.
Sorry, I ask them every month, Joanna. I ask them every time we're locked down, and I keep asking them every month if they're happy with what they're doing.
Thank you. I think that covers that off. So I think on that basis, and as we still have a lot to get through, I moved to the motion that is listed, which is basically, if I read it correctly, do you want me to read it again? The committee
yes, please, Chair.
this in view of the government's advice and the fact that the hours the caretakers have already been cut, blah, blah, blah. The Personnel Committee are therefore not recommending any staff to be furloughed. So the recommendation of the Personnel Committee is to not furlough anyone. Simon?
I'll second that.
So all those in favour of accepting the Personnel Committee's recommendation that we don't furlough anyone?
That's 7-4, Chair.
All those against?
1, 2, 3 against.
Any abstentions? I think we've lost.
I think that's
haven't we?
now.
Okay, so that brings us to 7.6, which is to discuss and agree the Personnel Committee recommendation to amend the email policy as per the supporting papers. So I'll just read this out. The email policy was discussed at length and an amendment suggested. Councillor Lloyd proposed, seconded by Councillor Norcross, that the current email policy, agreed May 2020, is considered by the committee to be sufficient guidance for councillors, but in view of the desire by the committee to ensure the well-being of the officers, paragraph 3.1.11 is recommended to be changed to, quote, emails should only be sent during normal business hours and up to 7 p.m. on weekdays, up to 1 p.m. on Fridays, and not to be sent during weekends and holiday periods. Simon?
I had one further thought after this, Chair, that I wondered if we could possibly consider an amendment, and that's all council emails should be sent from a council email address as well, or domain name, the @stenningpc.gov.uk.
Does anyone else have anything they want to say on that? Tim, and then Paul.
Thank you. I wasn't aware that they were being sent in any other way. So perhaps somebody could clarify that for me. There'd be no reason we have .gov.uk email addresses.
Paul?
Well, as I thought, most councillors knew, if not all, well, in fact, all councillors must know, really.
I'm sorry, Chair.
Is Councillor Lloyd going to say, no, is Councillor Lloyd going to say yet again that he hasn't read any of my emails in the last 2 years?
I've read your emails, but I don't necessarily read the addresses at the top.
Right.
I'm assuming that it gets sent through. So,
well, over the last 2 years, I have been sending from a dedicated email address, dedicated because of FOI reasons. And as John knows very well, I have been trying to get my computers sorted out for nearly 2 years. Finally, it was done last week. It took precisely 26 minutes when the IT man was finally allowed to engage with me. So up until last week, I have been doing it as a workaround with John's tacit approval. It will no longer be necessary because at last it's been sorted out.
Right, thank you. So I think it's probably taken as read that emails should come from the SPC email domain, and clearly are now. So again, in the interest of moving on, unless does anyone have anything else they want to add to this debate? Sarah?
Well, it's just that Councillor Campbell, Councillor Gary Sullivan and myself, and I believe Councillor Goff have all had terrible problems with their Steyning Parish Council emails for a very long time. As far as I'm aware, I cannot send emails on my council SPC email address to, for example, Councillor Goldsmith. It just doesn't go through. So I would have to, you know, can you hear me again?
Yes, so
can you hear me?
If you've got issues with your SPC email address, and I can honestly say that I have none, but that you actually ask John to get, or
we have.
Well, ask John for Tom Packer's phone number, and then he can try and then you can talk to him direct.
We have, and yet again, Councillor Gary Sullivan has absolutely no SPC email address. It's just dropped. And it always seems to be Councillor Gary Sullivan, myself, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Goldsmith who are having these terrible ongoing problems.
Well, as you say, but
so we're not receiving and we're not able to send emails.
Well, that's maybe. I know Councillor Goldsmith receives them because I receive responses from him myself, and I'm sure everyone else does as well. So anyway, I would suggest, Simon, and are you happy to withdraw your amendment, Simon?
Yeah, I can withdraw it.
Okay, so that amendment is withdrawn. So does anyone have anything else to say about the proposal? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. I'm reminded that when this email policy was first mooted, Councillor Lloyd was with me at HR resource sources or whatever they're called. And the reason we agreed to the hours that were agreed to include up to Saturday midday was because we felt that the idea was that we should not discourage younger people from joining the council. And if we restrict the hours to these, then when are people who work full time supposed to send their emails? So
well,
that,
up to 7 p.m. I think
well, a lot of people work by the time they've got home. It's going to be very difficult for them to do it up till 7 p.m.
Well, I work full time, so I
well,
manage.
maybe you do, but we've got 3,000
Tim,
odd people
I think you've made your point. Well, Tim,
well,
would
I
you
haven't
like to...
finished my point because I want to move on to the point about 1 p.m. on Fridays. So we had a very good example today, on Friday, when we were sent through all these papers at 4:30 p.m. Yes, and we, under this policy, we're not allowed to correspond, not just with the clerk, but with each other about such an important thing, giving us less than one working day to try and address this sort of thing. Now, just as with anonymous questions, I don't know any organisation which forbids the sending of emails. It's perfectly true that there's often an expectation written in the policy that you should not expect a reply outside of normal working hours. But the idea that you can't send one is very, very unusual. And it's actually very difficult because if, for example, one does a lot of work on the Friday, to have to then set your alarm for 8 o'clock on a Monday to send it is not appropriate.
Thank you. I think we gather your point, Tim. And then Steve.
Muted, Tim.
You're muted, Tim. You're still muted, Tim.
Apologies. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was there at the meeting and it was done under different circumstances. And now we've been faced with a discussion with the clerk's office about the number of emails, the types of emails, the language used and so on. And it was felt by the committee that if we were in the situation that the clerk was, to receive maybe 60 to 80 emails on a Monday morning, having all been done at the weekend, that this was an unreasonable burden. So we were looking for a way in which we could ease that burden. And it was the general consensus agreement within the personnel committee that we would bring in slightly more, if you like, stringent rules about it so that we could improve the email flow to the clerk's office, particularly on a Monday morning. That's the reason. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Yes, I think this was another one of those discussions we had that it was more consensus rather than unanimous. I think we certainly do need to do something about the probably the number, the length, and the tone of emails. But I do feel that it's, as Paul said, it's not really so much about when you send them, it's about when people are expected to read them. It's very often more convenient for me to do something in an evening or over the weekend, but with no expectation of it being read by the office until working hours. So yes, I think we need to look at tone, number, length, but I would vote against the restriction to sending emails on a particular time schedule.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, do you have anything new to add?
Yes, I do. I do actually agree with Councillor Northern. The point I was going to make is the clerk, does this apply? Well, several questions. Firstly, does this apply to the clerk? Because we get a deluge of emails and supporting papers on a Friday afternoon. You couldn't begin to actually read them, let alone actually digest them and think, is there anything you want to get clarified? And by then, if you get them on a Friday afternoon, you can't ask over the weekend, or rather you can't send the email. You've only then got Monday when a lot of people will be working. And to pick up again, there's an awful lot of council meetings we have where parish councillors don't turn up for committee meetings, and often the apology is they're running late from work, or they're only on their way home from work. So I think it's going to be very difficult for somebody who perhaps doesn't live 5 minutes up the road to actually leave their work, get home, and actually, you know, make a reply. I mean, I just think it's just another way of actually preventing councillors being able to ask questions. Then you're going to have more of councillors bringing the question up during the actual meeting, and then we're told we can't, you know, it's all rush. So it's just another way of actually stopping councillors from doing what they're elected for, which is actually trying to find out information. And we all know we shouldn't be predetermined on something. We might be predisposed, but we should come to the meeting and have sufficient time to debate things. And at the moment, we're not. I mean, it's going to be even worse if we actually come along and we just need clarification or more information on something that's been sent round. We've had numerous briefing papers which are go into a great deal more detail than we usually have, but tonight, although these have been much more full briefing papers and they came through a lot earlier than we often get them, we've still had multiple questions on them.
We did indeed, and so
I just think it's another way.
John, can you just, is it possible, I haven't got it in front of me, the current email policy suggests that we restrict emails. Am I right in thinking it's up to midday on Saturday?
I don't have the email policy in front of me, but it was, I thought it was, yeah, 1 o'clock. I'm uncertain, Chair. Hang on.
Okay. Does anyone? I mean, I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Unless, so I mean, in the absence of that, I'm not able to make any suggestions, sensible amendment suggestions. So I would move that we vote on the proposal, and then people can make a decision based on the proposal. They can vote for or against it.
Sorry, Chair, it sounds as if there might be an amendment to that.
Absolutely. Does somebody wish to make an amendment to the proposal?
No, Chair, I just felt we hadn't quite finished the debate, because Councillor Lloyd made a point which I just didn't follow at all, because what he said was this was intended to try to reduce the number of emails which John would be faced with on a Monday morning. Well, I mean, there's guarantees that from 1 p.m. right the way through till 8 o'clock or whatever it is on Monday morning, there will be no emails, and therefore there will be a deluge on Monday morning, the backlog. So it doesn't address that issue at all, as I see it.
Okay, fair enough. Tim, briefly, because I'm really.
I can come back on that. Well, I don't agree. I think the point is that if you saw John's email box on a Monday morning, he comes into the office at 8:30 or 8:45, and he's faced with sort of 60 or 70 emails. Admittedly, not all from councillors, accept that, but a large number are from councillors. So if we restrict that to the Friday, it was felt that we would reduce that load.
Thank you, Deborah, and then I think we really do need to vote on this and move on. So you're on mute, Deborah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all right, Number. Yeah, so I just wanted to ask through you, Chair, John, I do believe that the Steyning Centre is supposedly closed, or the clerk's office supposedly closed from 2:30 on a Friday. Is that right, John?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. So that means that it's only an hour and a half from the 1 o'clock deadline for John to have time to maybe clear up the week's jobs, and also to answer any urgent emails that people have sent before 1 o'clock. And so is he supposed to, it's only an hour and a half, before he's supposed to clock off. So anything that, I mean, when he sends late emails, it's because he's doing overtime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm basically going to move to the vote. I think we need to move the vote now, because we've discussed it at length. So the proposal is emails should only be sent during normal business hours and up to 7 p.m. on weekdays, up to 1 p.m. on Fridays, and not to be sent during weekends and holiday periods. Do I have a proposer for that motion, please, Simon? And do I have a seconder for that motion? Tim. So all those in favour of that motion?
That's 5-4, Chair.
And all those against?
4-5 against, Chair.
Okay. Any abstentions? I know the answer to
That's
that.
full number.
Okay. Which I presume means that it comes to me with the casting vote. Well, as I have the, I mean, as I already voted in favour, it would be at the very least disingenuous to now vote against. So I'm going to have to use my casting vote to vote in favour of the motion, please. So the motion is carried on my casting vote.
David's come back now.
David, can you just tell us very quickly what the buses was, because I'd really want to move on to item 10.
Yes, sorry, my internet disappeared. That's why I was absent, but I have listened with interest. Anyway, the answer on buses, and I have checked this while I've been away, is that there isn't a diminution of the actual subsidy. Now, we have to be clear here. The County Council doesn't subsidise the buses. What it has is a concessionary bus scheme where bus operators allow people, say, to travel after 9:30 on concessionary fares. Therefore, they put in for whatever it is they've allowed to the concessionary fare users, and county reimburses them. Now, at the moment with COVID, of course, there is a significant public saving because people aren't using the buses. And that's what I was getting a bit confused about when I was trying to find something. So there isn't an actual subsidy, so nothing's been altered, and the concessionary travel scheme remains as was.
Thank you, David.
Is that sufficiently clear?
That's a very clear answer. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I am here, by the way.
Sorry?
I'll turn my camera off again.
Thank you, David. I propose to move on to item, I know we haven't dealt with item 7.7, but I propose to move on to item 10 because we only have 18 minutes left, and this is quite an important topic that we need to speak about, albeit briefly. So item 10.1, which is an update on where the SPC are in terms of the current process and to discuss any questions raised. This is in relation to the neighbourhood plan, for those of you who aren't aware of that. So basically, I believe we've had a written question in from somebody about this. And really, as it says, update on where we are in terms of the current process. So John, can you just very briefly tell us where we are in the current process, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the residents and the recording, I know I've got it in supporting papers, just a very brief update. So I've been regularly in contact with HDC to check on the latest situation with regards to the neighbourhood plan examination. Latest email dated 5th February stated that there were some issues with some of the representations and reference to individuals including personal information, which needed to be redacted where necessary, and this was undertaken by the South Downs National Park Community Lead Officer on our behalf. He's in charge of the application. Documents have been sent to HDC and are now with their legal department. The appointment of the examiner has progressed. We're still awaiting confirmation that the representations can be published and sent to the examiner. So just an update for you.
Thank you, John. Does anyone have anything want to say? Steve and then Paul.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I really did want to. Since the last meeting, I've had a chance to look at the question that was raised by Nick Mugridge last time, and I think this really does deserve our thorough attention. Right now, I think we're going to be going to the examiner, or our plan will be going to the examiner. It's desperately thin. It's devoid of a housing policy, which I think is surely must be one of the most important aspects of a neighbourhood plan for a community such as ours. I mean, there were some reasons given, perhaps not all of us supported those reasons, and some of the reasons were given as to why that had to be the case. But things have changed now. I think, if nothing else, the overruling of our own neighbourhood neighbourhood planning committee might also cause the examiner some concern. And I'm told, I believe the local green space policy has been criticised by some who believe that it doesn't stand up under the relevant criteria. So it could either fail at examination or even leave the plan open to a judicial review if it manages to pass examination. I just think to allow this to go forward without a closer examination of the issues that Nick has raised would be negligent of the council and you know, in danger of spending more money and ending up with a plan which doesn't fulfil the needs of the community. I think we need to take every opportunity to perhaps try and get Horsham District Council to pause and allow us to examine this in more detail.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, well, Councillor Northam is doing the same thing as he did months and months ago with Mr. Muggeridge, which was to sort of this double act of trying to frighten us that there's going to be a judicial review. It's actually very different to how Councillor Northam describes it, in that Horsham has subjected this to its own in-depth legal analysis, and it's passed with flying colours. Chris Patterson, who is the advisor to Horsham District Council, has thoroughly praised the report, and in particular the local green space designations. What Councillor Northam says is just plain wrong. And actually, I've had something passed to me from, well, it's authored by Chris Patterson. It's been passed to me. If I may, I'd just like to read it out because it gives a slightly different impression to the one that I think one would have picked up from John's briefing paper, which sort of, to me, if I was reading it, would suggest that the examination process is not really got anywhere. So if I may, I'll just read this. I can confirm that HDC, with the agreement of Steyning PC, have appointed Andrew Ashcroft to examine the Steyning Neighbourhood Plan. Andrew's appointment was confirmed towards the end of last year. After Andrew's appointment was confirmed, I was tasked to review the representation received during the Regulation 16 consultation. This is normal practice to make sure that any personal details are redacted, so HDC comply with the data protection regulations when they publish the representations. Through the process of checking the representations, I identified some representations which included personal information in the body of the representation. HDC are now considering how to progress the publication of representations, but I hope we'll have confirmation on this in the next week or so. And this is the really important bit. So in summary, the examination is essentially underway. I know Andrew has reviewed the neighbourhood plan, but cannot progress the examination until he has received the representations and the representations are published. So the implication from that is that the examiner is so far happy. Steve made the point, which was made by Mr. Muggeridge in his letter, about Councillor Muggeridge made the point Steyning First councillors chose to override the recommendations of its own neighbourhood plan steering group. Well, I think most of us will remember that by the time that recommendation was made, it was down to precisely 4 people, 2 councillors and 2 unelected members of the public. And that recommendation was passed on the basis of the casting vote of the unelected member of the public. So it's hardly an overriding endorsement. And subsequently, we, the elected councillors, considered all of the issues and voted on it. Mr. Muggeridge says that landowners were arbitrarily sidelined. They weren't arbitrarily sidelined. They were not consulted as early as they could have been because it was the other way around. The problem was that the deadline was thrust upon us by Horsham, and so we couldn't do so. So,
okay, in the interest of, sorry to interrupt you, Paul, and I think it might surprise you to say that I think I'm probably going to be largely in agreement with you. I mean, I think in the interest of of dealing with this, my personal view is, I have no appetite for revisiting the neighbourhood plan. I make no bones about the fact that I didn't like the plan we submitted and I didn't vote in favour of it, but it went in, it's gone in, and as I said, my view is that I can see no mileage in looking backwards. However, because this is clearly a very contentious issue, what I would like to suggest, and this is obviously needs to be agreed by everyone here, the majority at least, is that perhaps we ask our consultant his view on what the ramifications would be were we to try and take the plan back, and any costs that would be associated with that, so that we have a clear picture of what we would be talking about if a decision was made by a majority to revisit the plan. Because at the moment we don't know, and we would potentially be revisiting a plan with no idea of what that might cost us and what the ramifications would be, etc., etc., etc. I think that would be a bad idea to make a decision without full information. Tim?
Chair, if we were to withdraw it, we would have to more or less start again, and we simply don't have the money for it. I agree with your comments. I didn't vote for it either, and I think it's a poor plan, but it's the plan that was put forward by the majority of the council, and we have to stand by that. And it will be up to the if you like the naysayers are correct, then the plan will be thrown out by the inspector. If those members who voted for it are correct, then it will go through.
Absolutely. Sarah?
I was just going to say, I know an awful lot of residents who did want to see our open spaces protected. We surveyed residents, 8 out of 10 said that they didn't want to see large developments in the South Downs National Park. Our colleague, Councillor Young, she stood on the mandate of protecting the national park, and I believe she got the top amount of votes, although she hadn't been previously much seen at Steyning Parish Council, but many people supported her because she wanted to protect the South Downs National Park. And a great deal has been made of well, I'll stop now because I could go on, but there are a huge amount of residents who would be absolutely appalled knowing that we've spent more than £60,000 on this neighbourhood plan, and there are a great many people who are absolutely in support of it. It's a bit like Brexit. We're never going to have 100%.
Well, I mean, actually, Sarah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you on all those points, but Simon, Steve, because you've already spoken once, and then I just want to ask John a question, and I think we need to sort this out.
It does say on the bottom of the letter from Mr. Mugridge, it does say to consider reconvening a steering group. Now, surely that would be advisable, given that the examiner may come back with questions. So there may be questions and queries coming back to the examiner. At least if we had a steering group, we could prepare for that. On a separate note as well, can Councillor Campbell explain why he hasn't shared that document with the rest of the council? He seems to have privy information that surely all of us should also have access to.
Paul, do you want to respond to that briefly?
Yes, if I can respond to other things as well, please, Chair. The simple answer is I was only provided with it today, and that's why I've shared it with the council. So I've shared it. Of course, the other thing that we would lose if we withdrew this is the SIL. And one of the bits of false information that this is the idea of abandoning it is being sold on.
Point of order, please.
Sorry, Steve.
May I raise a point of order? I think Councillor Campbell was asked just to respond to go back to the point made by Alexander.
Right.
Yeah, well,
we are tight of time.
We are.
I think Councillor Campbell's already spoken a lot on this.
Well, so has Councillor Northam. So is he going to be allowed to speak and not me?
No, neither of you are actually. On that basis, I think that in the interest of being fair, it would be wrong of me to prevent you, Paul, and to allow Steve. So I shall allow neither of you to say anything else, and then you're both being silenced. Your words, not mine. John, do you have anything you want to add to this? Is there anything you feel you can help with, or I mean, because it seems we were going round and round in circles. I mean, I would like to propose that we go back to our consultant and ask his professional advice. John?
Well, he is the professional. If we were to entertain some thought contrary to what we've already agreed, then really we ought to ask him what, as you say, what the ramifications are of that particular suggestion. Then we'd be better informed, and we'd be able to make an informed decision one way or the other on whether we're, reconstituting the steering committee or whichever way you want to formulate the motion, Chair.
Thank you, John. Well, given that it's now, we've only got 5 minutes left, I would like to propose a motion that you, John, ask our consultant what the ramifications would be if we were to withdraw the plan and how much that would likely cost us, so that we can then bring that back to the next meeting and have an informed discussion about what we want to do, so that we know how much it would cost us.
I'm happy to second that.
And
Yeah,
what
I'd like to propose an amendment, please, because I think the timing of this, is wrong. The time to ask that question is after the examiner has reported and we know whether there are implications from the examination of what we might need to do, because the examiner might say it's all a load of rubbish, start again, or the examiner might say it's absolutely brilliant. And depending on the outcome of that would dictate the sort of questions that we needed to ask our man in terms of what would happen if we withdrew it. In fact,
So would you like to propose the amendment?
Yes, so the amendment is such consultation to be delayed until the examiner has reported.
I have a seconder for Paul's amendment, please.
I will.
Gary, all those in favour of Paul's amendment? Are we clear what the motion is? We are, aren't we? John, are you clear what the motion is? Lovely. So all those in favour of Paul's amendment?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, Chair.
All those against?
2 against.
And any abstentions?
And 2 abstentions.
So Paul, your amendment is carried.
Can we have that recorded, please?
I think they're all recorded, aren't they, Gary?
Yes, I'm recording it,
sure.
Gary.
I think they're all recorded as a matter of course. So that deals with item 10.1, and we've only got 3 minutes left. I'm terribly sorry, Bob. We're not going to get to, you've sat through this entire meeting and we're not going to get to your report. So please accept my apologies for that. Shall we just very quickly, if we can, deal with item 7.7, which was to discuss and agree any recommendations from the Personnel Working Party, which met on the 11th of February, as per supporting papers. Chris, would you like to just talk to that?
Yes, in fact, there aren't any supporting papers because we're still, the Working Party has still to put their suggestions and ideas back to the full Personnel Committee, and we'll be doing that for the next Personnel Committee meeting. So it's ongoing.
So it's dealt with.
Can I just ask what the subject matter is, please, Chair?
Absolutely. Chris, can you speak to that? Because I'm not on this, so.
It's it's looking at the suggestions made in the James Corrigan reports to increase the efficiency of the working of the council. So it's looking at his suggestions and seeing if we agree with them, and if we do, how we can implement them.
Thank you. So it deals with item 7.7. John, do we realistically have time to receive the neighbourhood warden's report?
Well, we started 1 minute late, so I give it.
Okay.
Yes.
Look, we haven't got time to discuss 7.7.1. I mean.
Well, no, but I think we ought. Sorry, Chair. But through you, I think we ought to agree as to what we're going to do with that. We're either going to defer it.
Well, we can't, because the meeting is
well, exactly. So you're going to go in without any terms of reference, or
well, John, would I be right in assuming that because we haven't discussed how we would vote, that we would actually not be able to vote because we don't have a mandate?
Well, we've agreed that they're a representation. We don't know all of the information until we, have reached the meeting. To be honest, we can only get an idea, as I said in the supporting paper, just an idea as to where our support would be, but we don't know for certain until we have more information. That's why it's important to be at the meeting itself, Chair.
Okay, but just so I'm clear, so whoever attends the meeting, would they be able to vote at the meeting or not?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
They would be able to vote?
Yes.
Right, because I think that's quite important that we establish whether or not that's possible.
Yes.
Well, on that note, we have 1 minute left, so we could, I mean, possibly very quickly receive the neighbourhood warden's report.
Well,
or not.
Chair, could I just make the point before we move on that we elected those 3 representatives against your assurance that we would move on and agree terms of reference for them. I don't think it's proper for them to go to the meeting, having been elected, on that basis, and to just vote according to what they personally think on that day.
In that case, I think what we might suggest is that any vote we make would be an abstention, which is a form of vote. I think that's, if we're not, I mean, because I take your point, Paul, absolutely. Steve, very quickly, and then I'm going to close the meeting.
Can I propose that we authorise the attendees of the WSBC meet? Sorry, well, the W. Forgotten the acronym. To vote in accordance with their best judgment.
We're out of time, Chair. It's 10:01.
John, are we out of time?
It is, yes, we are out of time.
In that case, I'm afraid we're out of time, so I'm afraid we'll have to be abstaining, and we can explain why. So this meeting is now closed. So thank you very much for coming. And
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Can we give apologies to Councillor Platt, please? Can we give apologies to
I've
Councillor?
already done that, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
But I had already apologised to him.
Yeah, she has, yes.
I had.
And it's accepted.
Thank you, Bob. And
Even
sorry.
I can be courteous sometimes.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
And thank you again, Bob.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.